Hello, lovelies. I'm Amanda Rain with an E, and today we read Unsolved Mysteries. Hello, CJ. Hello, Lozzie. How are you guys today? We are going to wait specifically for Miss Damiana Swan. She requested this stream, not specifically for reading, but another cleaning stream. But y'all will be pleased to know that I am currently sitting in my finished wraparound workstation. So almost all of the things on the list from the other day are actually done. That's why I've been MIA all freaking week, because that took hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Damiana! All right, this stream is for you, baby. This book has 623 pages, okay? So please get to work. Do not make me read all of them. I do not want to read all of them, okay? Okay. So, yeah, we're gonna go ahead. Now, okay, so the other half of the room is completely untouched. But you know what? I've got this workstation in front of me. I turn to my left and there's the L desk with the workstation there. And then over there in my little kitchenette space, I've got like a Keurig and a little mini fridge, and like it's so cute. And if you go back there, there's my bed, and guess what? You can walk from the door all the way to the head of the bed, come back and come all the way into this space, and you don't trip on anything, and there's nothing like you got to step over. It's perfect. The only fucky ducky thing is that my microphone is on the wrong side now, and my second monitor for work is also on the wrong side, and it's fucking with me. But other than that, it's okay. And I have like flowers everywhere and crochet stuff, and I had room to decorate, and just wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. You couldn't hear me? I'm right here. You moved some furniture? I kind of. The furniture is all in the same spot that it was, but like the stuff that was on the furniture is gone. The computers are all moved around. The work stuff is moved. The kitchen type stuff is moved. Everything's moved. It took literally like 20 hours. 20 hours. There is the sex table. I do not have one of those because it's me and a bunch of kids up in here, so yeah. Humorously, CJ, I do not have room for the laptop. But, you know. Hello, Alamon. How are you? I would have to rearrange the whole desk again. That was not the whole point. No, the whole point was that I could get to my desk without having to step over bins and boxes and things. Like, it was literally like living inside of a storage unit. So at least this half of the room is now a fucking bedroom or office or whatever you want to call it. That half of the room, we don't talk about that. Okay? Okay. So anyway, I've been on the starting soon screen for like 5 minutes. My apologies. Let me go ahead and sit here. As you can see, the only thing left on this list is to make sure Damiana gets her desk done. So, let's read. Yay. Fair warning, some of these things are grisly and gory and whatever else. I have not pre-read this book, so be warned, I guess. I still live in a storage unit. I get like 15 degrees of rotation. Oh, dude, I couldn't even, like, my chair was like sideways, and I had to step like over this and that to even get to the desk. Go up on one foot, put my other knee down in the chair, sit down, and then cross my legs in the chair and turn. There is no foot space. There's no body space. There's no nothing. So these are all really short too. It's not like super long stories, but I'm gonna read them. Sounds like how to do a rain dance. Well, you know, I am Rain with an E. Let's see. I want to read that one. Ooh, Jack the Ripper. Okay. And if y'all can't hear me or like the music's too loud or whatever, please say so. Because there's not a lot of feedback on my side. Okie dokie. The serial killer, known as Jack the Ripper, is one of history's most famous murderers. He breathed terror into the gaslit streets and foggy back alleys of the Whitechapel area of London and became renowned the world over. Despite the countless books and movies detailing his story, however, his identity and motives remain shrouded in mystery. One of the most popular theories, espoused by the 2001 movie From Hell, starring Johnny Depp, links the killer to the British royal family. 5 murders are definitively attributed to Jack the Ripper, and he has variously been connected to at least 6 other unsolved slayings in the London area. The body of the first victim, 43-year-old Mary Ann Nichols, was discovered on the morning of August 31, 1888. Nichols' throat had been cut and her abdomen mutilated. The subsequent murders, which took place over a 3-year period, grew in brutality. This music with this book. Anyway, the killer removed the uterus of his second victim, Annie Chapman, part of the womb and left kidney of Catherine Eddowes, and the heart of Mary Kelly. All of his victims were prostitutes. A man claiming to be the murderer sent a letter dated September 25, 1888, to the Central News Agency, which passed it on to the Metropolitan Police. The letter included the line, "I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled." It was signed, "Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." A later postcard included the same sign-off. When police went public with details of the letters, the name Jack the Ripper stuck. Officers from the Metropolitan Police and Scotland Yard had 4 main suspects: a poor Polish resident of Whitechapel by the name of Kosminski, a barrister who died by suicide in December 1888, a Russian-born thief, and an American doctor who fled to the States in November 1888 while on bail for gross indecency. Since there was little or no evidence against any of these men, the case spawned many conspiracy theories, the most popular of which links the killings to the royal family. The heir to the British throne was Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria and son of the man who would later become King Edward VII. The prince, popularly known as Eddie, had a penchant for hanging around in the East End, and rumors abounded that he had a daughter, Alice, out of wedlock, with a shopgirl named Annie Crook. To prevent major embarrassment to the crown, Eddie sought assistance from Queen Victoria's physician, Dr. William Gull, who institutionalized Annie to keep her quiet. However, her friends, including Mary Kelly, also knew the identity of Alice's father, so Dr. Gull created the persona of Jack the Ripper and brutally silenced them one by one. A variation on this theory has Dr. Gull acting without the knowledge of the prince, instead driven by madness resulting from a stroke he suffered in 1887. Royal involvement would certainly explain why the police were unable to uncover the identity of the Ripper, or to even settle on a prime suspect. There was a shopgirl named Annie Crook who had an illegitimate daughter named Alice, but there's nothing to connect her to either the prince or the murdered prostitutes. In fact, there's no evidence to suggest that the murdered women knew one another. Until the identity of Jack the Ripper is settled beyond doubt, these and other conspiracy theories will likely persist. So over 120 years later, they still don't know who he is. You miss raspy, Amanda? This is raspy-ish. Raspy-ish. Let's see here. The Hollywood Sign Girl. In the 1930s, Millicent Lillian Entwistle was a young aspiring actress in New York when she was lured to Hollywood by 2 West Coast producers, Homer Curran and Edward Belasco, who asked Entwistle to co-star in their play The Mad Hopes. With dreams of finally hitting the big time, Entwistle moved to Hollywood. Although the play was a success, it closed on schedule on June 4, 1932, at which time Entwistle signed a 1-movie deal with RKO Pictures and began working on the film 13 Women. Several months later, test screenings for the film produced very negative comments, many of which were directed at Entwistle. RKO held back the film from general release while the director heavily edited the picture, deleting many of Entwistle's scenes in the process. According to those close to her, Entwistle took this to mean that she was a failure and would never succeed in Hollywood. On Friday, September 16, 1932, Entwistle said she was going to meet some friends, but instead she made her way to the top of Mount Lee. After placing her personal belongings at the base of the Hollywood sign, she used a workman's ladder to climb to the top of the H and jumped to her death. She was only 24 years old. The suicide note found in her purse read simply, "I am afraid I am a coward. I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain." 13 women officially opened after Entwistle's death, and while it did not get good reviews, her name was never mentioned. Her uncle speculated to the press after her death that she was disappointed by not being able to impress the movie industry, and the rumors spiraled from there. The real cause of her decision to end her life remains a mystery, but to this day, Entwistle's suicide symbolizes Hollywood's ability to smash the dreams of so many aspiring actors and actresses. Poor Entwistle. I'm gonna have to pause to drink things. Well, I mean, what music? You can hear it, right? There's music.
I am right behind you.
Oh my goodness. Welcome in, Miles. Thomas Ince. A boating excursion turns deadly. The movie industry has been rocked by scandal throughout its history, but few incidents have matched the controversy and secrecy surrounding the death of Thomas Ince, a high-profile producer and director of many successful silent films. This could be Ince, I don't know, I-N-C-E. During the 1910s, he set up his own studio in California, where he built a sprawling complex of small homes, sweeping mansions, and other buildings that were used as sets for his movies. Known as Inceville, the studio covered several thousand acres, and it was there that Ince perfected the idea of the studio system, a factory-style setup that used a division of labor amongst large teams of costumers, carpenters, electricians, and other film professionals who moved from project to project as needed. This system, which allowed for the mass production of movies with the producer in creative and financial control, would later be adopted by all major Hollywood film companies. Yes, I'm reading a book, nerd. Unsolved Mysteries, baby. Down on his luck by the 1920s, Ince still had many influential friends and associates. In November 1924, newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst offered to host a weekend birthday celebration for the struggling producer aboard his luxury yacht, the Oneida. Several Hollywood luminaries attended, including Charlie Chaplin and Marion Davies, as well as Luella Parsons, then a junior writer for one of Hearst's East Coast newspapers. But at the end of the cruise, Ince was carried off the ship on a medical gurney and rushed home, where he died 2 days later. A hastily scribbled death certificate blamed heart failure. No, we love nerds here. Do not bash. Almost immediately, the rumor mill churned out shocking and sordid versions of the incident, which were very different from the official line. A Chaplin employee who was waiting at the docks when the boat returned reportedly claimed that Ince was suffering from a gunshot wound to the head when he was taken off the Oneida. Could he have been the victim of a careless accident at the hands of a partying Hollywood celeb? Perhaps, but film industry insiders knew of complex and passionate relationships among those on board, and a convoluted and bizarre scenario soon emerged and has persisted to this day. As it turns out, Davies was Hearst's longtime mistress, despite being almost 34 years his junior. She was also a close friend of the notorious womanizer Chaplin. Many speculate that Hearst, enraged over the attention that Chaplin was paying to the young lady, set out to kill him, but shot the hapless Ince by mistake. Certain events after Ince's death helped the rumors gain traction. Ince's body was cremated, so no autopsy could be performed. Can we read the script to Shrek? I think that's copyrighted, actually. This book does not have an author, so it's safe to read. His grieving widow was whisked off to Europe for several months, courtesy of Hearst, conveniently away from the reach of the American press. Luella Parsons was also elevated within the Hearst organization, gaining a lifetime contract and the plum assignment as his #1 celebrity gossip columnist, which she parlayed into a notoriously self-serving enterprise. Conspiracy theorists believe that she wrangled the deal with Hearst to buy her silence about the true cause of Ince's death. Was Ince the victim of an errant gunshot and subsequent cover-up? If anyone in 1920s California had the power to hush witnesses and bend officials to his will in order to get away with murder, it was the super-rich and powerful Hearst. But no clear evidence of foul play has emerged after all these decades. Still, the story has persisted and even served as a subject for The Cat's Meow, a 2002 film directed by Peter Bogdanovich, which starred Kirsten Dunst as Davies and Carrie Elwes? E-L-W-E-S, I don't know, as the doomed Ince. Cats do meow, indeed. What's that script everybody posts? The Bee Movie? We'll do that one. Okay. Thelma Todd. Suicide or murder? During her 9-year film career, Thelma Todd co-starred in dozens of comedies with the likes of Harry Langdon, Laurel and Hardy, and the Marx Brothers. Today, however, the Ice Cream Blonde, as she was known, is best remembered for her bizarre death, which remains one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. Let's explore what could have happened. If you want to read the entire script of the Bee Movie and post it to YouTube, I think you get a lot of these memes. Probably, but I'll also get sued by whoever wrote the Bee Movie, so don't know about that. Thelma Todd was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1906 and arrived in Hollywood at age 20 via the beauty pageant circuit. Pretty and vivacious, she quickly became a hot commodity and fell headlong into Tinseltown's anything-goes party scene. For educational purposes, right. In 1932, she married Pasquale Pat DeCiccio, an agent of sorts who was also associated with gangster Charles Lucky Luciano. Their marriage was plagued by drunken fights, and they divorced 2 years later. Bees don't have knees, so they couldn't make pollen? What do they need knees for? For solace, Todd turned to director Roland West, who didn't approve of her drinking and drug use, but he could not stop her. With his help, Todd opened a roadhouse called Thelma Todd Sidewalk Cafe, located on the Pacific Coast Highway. The actress moved into a spacious apartment above the restaurant. Shortly after, Todd began a relationship with gangster Luciano, who tried to get her to let him use a room at the Sidewalk Cafe for illegal gambling. Todd refused. On the morning of December 16, 1935, Todd was found dead in the front seat of her 1934 Lincoln Phaeton convertible, which was parked in the two-car garage she shared with West. The apparent cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning, though whether Todd was the victim of an accident, suicide, or murder remains a mystery. Little evidence supports the suicide theory outside of the mode of death, in the fact that Todd led a fast-paced lifestyle that sometimes got the better of her. Indeed, her career was going remarkably well, and she had purchased Christmas presents and was looking forward to a New Year's Eve party, so suicide does not seem a viable cause, though it is still mentioned as a probable one in many accounts. CJ, what the heck? However, an accidental death is also a possibility. The key to her car was in the on position, and the motor was dead when Todd was discovered by her maid. West suggested to investigators that the actress turned on the car to get warm, passed out because she was drunk, and then succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning. Todd also had a heart condition, according to West, and this may have contributed to her death. Nonetheless, the notion of foul play is suggested by several incongruities found at the scene. Spots of blood were discovered on and in Todd's car and on her mouth, and her nose was broken, leading some to believe she was knocked out and then placed in the car to make it look like a suicide. Police attributed the injuries to Todd falling unconscious and striking her head on the steering wheel. In addition, Todd's blood alcohol level was extremely high enough to stupefy her so that someone could carry her without fighting back, and her high-heeled shoes were clean and unscuffed, even though she would have had to ascend a flight of outdoor concrete stairs to reach the garage, which was a 271-step climb behind the restaurant, That's a lot of freaking stairs. Jeez. Investigators also found an unidentified smudged handprint on the left side of the vehicle. If Todd was murdered, as some have suggested, who had motive? Because of her wild lifestyle, there are several potential suspects, most notably Pasquale DeCiccio, who was known to have a temper, and Lucky Luciano, who was angry at Todd for refusing to let him use her restaurant for illegal activities. Despite the many questions raised by the evidence found at the scene, a grand jury ruled Todd's death accidental. The investigation had been hampered by altered and destroyed evidence, threats to witnesses, and cover-ups, making it impossible to ever learn what really happened. An open casket service was held at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, where the public viewed the actress bedecked in yellow roses. After the service, Todd was cremated, eliminating the possibility of a second autopsy. Later, when her mother Alice Todd died, the actress's ashes were placed in her mother's casket so they could be buried together. Oh, don't mind me, I'm just yapping. Example of the study of the social behavior between bees and humans and the economics of honey making. Would I have to just like read the bee movie script but also interject like pro tips and facts and stuff for it to be okay? I don't know how that works. All right. I don't actually know most of these people. Of course, it was from like the third, like my dad wasn't even born yet. Let's see. William Desmond Taylor. The murder of actor-director William Desmond Taylor was like something out of an Agatha Christie novel, complete with a handsome, debonair victim and multiple suspects, each with a motive. But unlike Christie's novels, in which the murderer was always unmasked, Taylor's death remains unsolved nearly 100 years later. On the evening of February 1st, 1922, Taylor was shot in the back by an unknown assailant. His body was discovered the next morning by a servant, Henry Peavy. News of Taylor's demise spread quickly, and several individuals, including officials from Paramount Studios, where Taylor was employed, raced to the dead man's home to clear it of anything incriminating, such as illegal liquor, evidence of drug use, illicit correspondence, and signs of sexual indiscretion. However, no one called the police until later in the morning. Soon, an eclectic array of potential suspects came to light, including Taylor's former butler, Edward F. Sands, who had gone missing before the murder. Popular movie comedian Mabel Normand, whom Taylor had entertained the evening of his death. Actress Mary Miles Minter, who had a passionate crush on the handsome director who was 28 years her senior. And Charlotte Selby, Minter's mother, who often wielded a gun to protect her daughter's tarnished honor. Taylor's murder was the last thing Hollywood needed at the time, coming as it did on the heels of rape allegations against popular film comedian Fatty Arbuckle. Scandals brought undue attention on Hollywood, and the Arbuckle story had taken its toll. Officials at Paramount tried to keep a lid on the Taylor story, but the tabloid press had a field day. A variety of personal foibles were made public in the weeks that followed, and both Normand and Minter saw their careers come to a screeching halt as a result. If we're reading Unsolved Mysteries, shouldn't the music be more mysterious? I know, right? Like, I mean, I guess, like, well, I don't know. Do we know of any, like, creepy, mysterious, copyright-free music? Dead, decapitated, and stuffed into freezers? Yeah, you know. I mean, it was 100 years ago, you know? Like, I don't know. Police interviewed many of Taylor's friends and colleagues, including all potential suspects. However, there was no evidence to incriminate anyone specifically, and no one was formally charged. There are people who are 118. What do you mean 100 years ago? I just mean like, they're probably not going to solve it now, you know? There's no evidence that people are bones, if that. Like, they gone. Did I say no one was formally charged? I don't know. There was no evidence to incriminate anyone specifically, and no one was formally charged. Investigators and amateur sleuths pursued the case for years, Sands was long a prime suspect based on his criminal past and his estrangement from the victim, but it was later revealed that on the day of the murder, Sands had signed in for work at a lumberyard in Oakland, California, some 400 miles away, and thus could not have committed the crime. Coming in second was Shelby, whose temper and threats were legendary. Shelby's own acting career had fizzled out early, and all of her hopes for stardom were pinned on her daughter. She threatened many men who tried to woo Mary. "Mary, something terrible's happened." In the mid-1990s, here we're getting warmer. In the mid-1990s, another possible suspect surfaced, a long-forgotten silent film actress named Margaret Gibson. According to Bruce Long, author of William Desmond Taylor, A Dossier, Gibson confessed to a friend on her deathbed in 1964 that years before she had killed a man named William Desmond Taylor. However, the woman to whom Gibson cleared her conscience didn't know who Taylor was and thought nothing more about it. Could Margaret Gibson, aka Pat Lewis, be Taylor's murderer? She had acted with Taylor in Hollywood in the early 1910s, and she may even have been one of his many sexual conquests. She also had a criminal past, including charges of blackmail, drug use, and prostitution. I read that as prosciutto twice. Prostitution. So it's entirely conceivable that she was a member of a group trying to extort money from the director, a popular theory among investigators. But according to an earlier book, A Cast of Killers by Sidney Kirkpatrick, veteran Hollywood director King Vidor had investigated the murder as material for a film script, and through his research believed Shelby was the murderer. But out of respect for Minter, he never did anything about it. Ultimately, however, we may never know for certain who killed William Desmond Taylor or why. The case has long grown cold, and anyone with specific knowledge of the murderer is likely dead. Unlike a Hollywood thriller in which the killer is revealed at the end, Taylor's death is a macabre puzzle that likely will never be solved. Death from on high. When a troubled man exacted revenge from a lofty perch, a stunned nation watched in horror and disbelief. What could cause a man to kill indiscriminately? Why hadn't anyone seen it coming? Could such a thing happen again? Decades later, the mystery continues. In an America strained by an escalating war in Vietnam, the 1966 headline still managed to shock the senses. The Texas Tower sniper had killed his mother and his wife before snuffing out the lives of 13 innocents on the University of Texas campus at Austin. At least the Vietnam conflict offered up motives. Like most wars, battle lines had been drawn, and a steady buildup of threats and tensions had preceded the violence. But here, no such declarations were issued. Bullets came blazing out of the sky for no apparent reason. After the victims breathed their last and the nightmare drew to a close, a stunned populace was left with one burning question: why? Charles Whitman appeared to have enjoyed many of life's advantages. Hailing from a prominent family in Lake Worth, Florida, the future was Whitman's to make or break. But friction with his abusive father found Whitman seeking escape. After a brutal incident in which he returned home from a party drunk, only to be beaten and nearly drowned in a swimming pool by his father, the 18-year-old Whitman enlisted in the U.S. Marines. He served for 5 years, distinguishing himself with a sharpshooter's badge. After that, he attended college at UT. During that period, he also married his girlfriend, Kathy Leisner. Whitman's life plan appeared to be straightforward. After obtaining a scholarship, he would seek an engineering degree.
Alas, I am dehydration, so I must consume drink.
Brandon, welcome in. I should hydrate. Yes, I did not do that between stories. I got like 6 water bottles, so we're good. Hope you're well, Brandon. Okay, so he was going to get an engineering degree, hoping to follow it up with acceptance at Officers Candidate School, but things didn't go as planned. After leaving the military, Whitman worked towards a variety of goals in and out of school. Unfortunately, the ex-Marine was fraught with failure, and his frustrations multiplied. In the spring of 1966, Whitman sought the help of UT psychiatrist Dr. Maurice Dean Heatley. In a moment of ominous foretelling, Whitman remarked that he fantasized going up on the campus tower with a deer rifle and shooting people. The doctor, having heard similar threats in the past, was mostly unimpressed. Since Whitman hadn't previously exhibited violent behavior, Heatley took his statement as nothing more than an idle threat. Yeah, but CJ, if I don't, then it'll get all gravelly again. Don't you want this? During the wee hours of August 1st, 1966, Whitman's demons finally won out and his killing spree began. For reasons still uncertain, the murderer kicked off his blood quest by first stabbing his mother in her apartment and his wife while she slept. Both died from their injuries. Whitman then made his way to the UT campus and ascended the soon-to-be infamous tower. At his side, he had enough provisions, weapons, and ammo to hole up indefinitely. Just before noon, he lifted a high-powered rifle and began shooting. He picked off victims one by one from the observation deck of the 307-foot-tall tower. Whitman's sharpshooting prowess, he once scored 215 points out of a possible 250 in target practice, added to the danger. When people finally realized what was happening, quite a few had already been cut down. As the attacks progressed, Austin police hatched a plan. Officers Ramiro Martinez and Houston McCoy, that's a cool name, Houston McCoy, attorney at law, snuck into the tower, surprising Whitman. Both sides exchanged fire. The 96-minute attack ended with 2 fatal shots to Whitman's head, compliments of McCoy's 12-gauge shotgun. The horror was over. In its ultimate wake lay 16 dead and 31 wounded. An autopsy performed on Whitman revealed a brain tumor that may have caused him to snap. The authorities later found a note at his home. Its matter-of-fact tone is chilling to this day. I imagine it appears that I brutally killed both of my loved ones. I was only trying to do a quick, thorough job. If my life insurance policy is valid, please pay off all my debts. Donate the rest anonymously to a mental health foundation. Maybe research can prevent further tragedies of this type. Well then, those brain tumors, they'll get you. Oh, I know these people. Tupac? Maybe I don't know them. Tupac. Is it Pac or Pac? And the Notorious B.I.G. Tupac Shakur. I don't know them. Like, I know of them, but I don't think I've ever said his name out loud before. Is it Tupac, like 2 packs of cigarettes? Or Tupac, like pockmarks? Just answers a question. I want to say it correctly. I'm gonna have to call him Shakur. Puke. No, it isn't. No, it's not. Puke. I'm just not gonna read this one then. No. Tupac. Actually, like Tupac. I'm trusting you, CJ. Don't make me look stupid. Okay. I'm going with it. I trust you. You need to go look it up. I'm reading here. You're right there. You could just tell me. How do you say Tupac Shakur?
Tupac Shakur.
Oh, I'm saying it right. Tupac Shakur. All right. Anyway. Also, if you guys want to play Yap Yap later, let me know. Everybody's got it. Let's play it. You can't say it's Tupac now. No, it's not. Tupac Shakur, known as Tupac, and Christopher Wallace, known as the Notorious B.I.G., were 2 of the biggest rappers in the 90s and arguably in history. One-time friends, the young rappers later became rivals. Sadly, both would end up dead following drive-by shootings just 6 months apart, and more than 20 years after the slayings, both murders remain unsolved. I said Tupac first, and then I said Tupac, and then I wasn't sure. I don't know these people. I was 5 years old when they were popular. Like, what? Born in 1971, a whole bunch of years before me. Tupac Shakur came from a family of Black Panthers and radical politics. He grew up in challenging homes and homeless shelters, but his creative chops landed him at the Baltimore School for the Arts, where he studied ballet, poetry, and acting. His family later moved from Baltimore to the San Francisco Bay Area. There, Shakur joined a rap group and signed a record deal. Like, how do you go from ballet to being one of the biggest rappers of all time? That's cool. Anyway, in 1991, now I was born. In 1991, Shakur released his debut solo album, Tupacalypse. Oh, well, if I'd known Tupacalypse, that would have made more sense. Tupacalypse Now, which caused controversy with its biting social commentaries. 1 year younger than his contemporary Christopher Wallace, grew up in Brooklyn. He was an accomplished student who, by age 15, was selling drugs. Wallace also began rapping as a teenager, at that time for fun. An editor at a rap scene national magazine got hold of one of Wallace's rap tapes, and the young rapper subsequently appeared in the magazine. Shakur and Wallace would later meet in the early 90s. When they met, Shakur was already an accomplished artist, while Wallace was working on his first album, Ready to Die, which would go on to sell millions of copies. The two struck up a friendship, and Wallace even asked Shakur to become his manager, an offer Shakur declined. But a feud ultimately developed between their dueling record labels, and this feud turned personal in 1994, when Shakur was shot 5 times during a robbery at a New York City recording studio. Shakur, who somehow survived, believed Wallace was behind the shooting. On September 7, 1996, Shakur attended a Mike Tyson boxing match in Las Vegas. After leaving the event with the then CEO of Death Row Records, Shakur got into a brawl with Orlando Anderson, a Crips gang member, in the MGM Grand Casino's lobby. Shortly after the fight, a white Cadillac pulled up beside Shakur's vehicle at a traffic light, and an occupant in the Cadillac fired into Shakur's vehicle, striking him 4 times. 6 days later, Shakur died at a Las Vegas hospital. Again, I was 11 years old, so it was not at the top of my news feed at the time. A 2002 investigation by Los Angeles Times suggested that the gang's Southside Crips carried out Shakur's killing in retaliation for the brawl in the MGM Grand lobby hours before the attack on Shakur's vehicle. The story also said that Wallace supplied the weapon for Shakur's murder, and he agreed to pay the gang $1 million for Shakur's killing. Orlando Anderson, a suspect involved in the MGM Grand brawl, later died in a drug-related shooting. Meanwhile, Wallace was shot dead on March 9, 1997 in Los Angeles after leaving a music industry party. A dark-colored Chevrolet Impala pulled up next to his vehicle, and an occupant fired into Wallace's side of his vehicle. An unsealed autopsy later revealed that a single bullet that pierced several vital organs is what killed Wallace. Though speculation swirled about the role of corrupt police officers in Wallace's killing, the FBI ended its inquiry in 2005 after prosecutors concluded that there was scant evidence to pursue a case. That year, a federal judge concluded that a LA police detective intentionally withheld evidence in a wrongful death lawsuit filed against the city by Wallace's family. The lawsuit, however, was dismissed in 2010. Kevin McClure, a former LAPD captain who oversaw the investigation into Wallace's murder, told the LA Times in 2017 that the shooter is likely dead. 20 years later. Oh, this one's really long. How's it going, Damiana? You're 40 minutes in, darling. Yeah, I have another book that's like random facts and stuff. I don't know, it's all really, really short, whereas this you can read for a while. H.H. Holmes, serial killer at the World's Fair. H.H. Holmes has secured a place in history as one of the cruelest, most horrifyingly prolific killers the world has ever seen. From his headquarters at a Chicago hotel, Holmes slaughtered at least 27 people, starting in the early 1890s. Many filmmakers, scholars, and authors have tried to understand the mind of the madman Holmes. Here's an overview of the twisted, convoluted details of the real-life Dr. Death. It's getting there. Apparently I have a death surface. We have surfaces? Like, I know, it was so weird when I took the bins off of this like L-shaped desk and you could see behind it. It was like, wow, this room's bigger than I thought. Born in May 1860, Herman Webster Mudgett was a highly intelligent child and did well in school, but he was constantly in trouble. As a teen, he became abusive to animals and small children, a classic characteristic of serial killers. Fascinated with bones, skeletons, and the human body, Mudgett decided to pursue a degree in medicine. He changed his name to H.H. Holmes, married Clara Lovering, and with her inheritance enrolled in medical school in Burlington, Vermont. In medical school, Holmes was able to be around skeletons, cadavers, and fresh corpses all the time, which suited him just fine. Very soon, however, it was obvious that Holmes wasn't in the medical field for humanitarian reasons. Ever the swindler, Holmes came up with a scheme whereby he'd take insurance policies out on family members he didn't actually have. He would steal cadavers from the school, make them look as if they'd had an accident, then identify the bodies as those of his family members to collect the insurance money. Some of these frauds brought in $10,000 or more per body. When authorities became suspicious of all these dead family members, Holmes abandoned Clara and their newborn baby. Where he went after that is a little murky, as the next 6 or so years of Holmes's life are not well documented. But by the mid-1880s, Holmes was back on the radar as a charming, intelligent, bold-faced liar and thief with murderous intentions. This time, his mark was Chicago. The city would become the site of Holmes's biggest, deadliest swindle of all. If you lived in Chicago in the late 1800s, you were likely consumed with thoughts of the World's Fair. Officially known as the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893, the colossal event had most of the Midwest working for its success. It was to be the event that would make America a superstar country and make Chicago one of the country's A-list cities. The Great Fire of 1871 had demolished the town. The World's Fair vowed to bring it back in a big way. It was during the years of preparation for the big fair that Holmes began his path of murder. With so many people flooding the city every day looking to nab one of the thousands of new jobs in the area, Chicago was experiencing a population boom that made it very easy to lose track of people. Holmes recognized this as an opportunity to lure women into his clutches, while most people had their focus elsewhere. He married his second wife, Myrtle, in 1885, even though he had never actually divorced Clara. While Myrtle lived in suburban Wilmette, Holmes took a place in Chicago, and the couple lived apart for most of their marriage. Holmes needed to be in the city because he was working at a drugstore in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood. He worked for the elderly Mrs. Holdens, a kind woman who was happy to have such an attractive young doctor help her out at her busy store. When Mrs. Holden disappeared without a trace in 1887, and Holmes purchased the store, no one suspected a thing. Holmes, who now had full access to a well-stocked drugstore with countless medical tools, chemicals, and medicines, purchased a vacant lot across the street from the drugstore and began construction on a house with a strange floor plan he had designed himself. The 3-story house would have 60 rooms, more than 50 doors placed in an odd fashion throughout the structure, trapdoors, secret passageways, windowless rooms, and chutes that led down to a deep basement. Holmes hired and fired construction crews on a regular basis, and it was said that his swindler's streak got him out of paying for most, or perhaps all, of the materials and labor used to create what would later be known as the Murder Castle. As construction of the castle wrapped up, Holmes made plans for several of his employees. The bookkeeper Holmes had at the store around 1890 was Ned Connor, a man who had come to Chicago with his lovely wife Julia and their baby daughter Pearl. Holmes found Julia irresistible and quickly put the make on her, firing Ned so his wife could take his place. It is believed that as his new bookkeeper, Julia was possibly an accomplice in the fraudulent actions at the drugstore, which eased Holmes's mind and allowed him to concentrate on his new building. Advertised as a lodging for World's Fair tourists, the building opened in 1892. Holmes placed ads in the newspaper to rent rooms, but also listed fake classifieds, calling for females interested in working for a startup company. He also placed ads for marriage, posing as a successful businessman in need of a wife. Any women who answered these fake ads was interviewed by Holmes and told to keep everything a secret, and was instructed to withdraw all funds from her bank account in order to start a new life with him as his worker, wife, or whatever role he had offered. Holmes was a brilliant liar and quite the charmer, and naive 19th century women fell for it. Once they passed Holmes's tests, these women became his prisoners, doomed to meet their grisly ends. Gas pipes were secretly installed throughout the house, with nozzles that piped noxious fumes into the rooms. Holmes would turn on the gas so that the victim du jour would drop to the floor unconscious. While she was out cold, Holmes would usually rape her, then send the girl down to the basement via the chute. Once there, he would perform experiments on her at his dissection table, or torture her with various equipment. He reportedly listened to the screams of the victims from an adjacent room. Once he had brutalized the unfortunate soul, he would dump her body into a vat of lime acid to completely destroy the evidence. Other times, he sold bones and organs to contacts in the medical field. Holmes murdered at least 22 people in his home, mostly women, though every once in a while a worried male neighbor or a concerned relative looking for a missing young woman would get too suspicious for Holmes's liking and go missing themselves. While the murder castle was in operation, Holmes continued to marry various women and carry out insurance fraud and other deviant acts. After the World's Fair ended, creditors put pressure on him again, and Holmes knew it was time to flee. He traveled across the United States and Canada, scamming and murdering along the way. Strange as it seems, when Holmes was finally caught and brought to justice, it wasn't initially for homicide. A horse swindling scheme he attempted to pull off with longtime partner in fraud Ben Pitzel was what gave authorities enough evidence to arrest Holmes. When they searched Holmes's Chicago dwelling, their investigation turned up a lot more than they anticipated. Over the years, one detective had been hot on Holmes's trail. Detective Frank Geyer, a veteran Pinkerton detective, had done his best to follow this creepy man whose identity changed with the weather. Geyer had traced many of the missing World's Fair women back to Holmes's lodging house and had discovered trails that pointed to his fraudulent activities. In 1895, Holmes entered a guilty plea for the horse fraud case, and Geyer took that opportunity to expand the investigation. He was particularly interested in the whereabouts of 3 children, Howard, Nellie, and Alice Pitzel, children of Holmes's now murdered accomplice, Ben Pitzel. Geyer traced the children and then Holmes by following his mail. When his search took him to Canada, Geyer knocked on doors all over Toronto to track down Holmes. Finally, he found a house where Holmes had allegedly stayed with several children in tow. Buried in a shallow grave in the backyard were the bodies of the 2 Pitzel girls. The boy was found several months later in an oven in an Indianapolis home. When the evidence was brought back to court, Geyer got full clearance to investigate every dark nook and cranny of Holmes's house and business, and one of America's most chilling stories of murder and crime officially broke. As detectives and police officers uncovered layer after layer of hideous evidence, the public became more and more frightened and fascinated. The Chicago Tribune published the floor plan of the murder castle, tourists flocked to ogle the building, and tabloids ran horrifying descriptions of what had happened to the victims inside, events both real and embellished. Then in August of 1895, Holmes's House of Horrors burnt to the ground. While all that took place inside his heavily guarded cell, Herman Webster Mudgett confessed to his crimes. He officially confessed to 27 murders, 6 attempted murders, and a whole lot of fraud. What he didn't confess to, however, were any feelings of remorse. Holmes claimed at times to be possessed by the devil, though depending on the day, he'd also claimed to be innocent of any wrongdoing whatsoever. All told, estimates of his victims may have hit the 200 mark. Just because he confessed to 27 murders does not mean that that's what his final tally was. Indeed, with the kind of liar Holmes was, it's pretty certain that that number is not accurate at all. Holmes was executed by hanging in 1896. He was buried in a coffin lined with cement, topped with more cement, and buried in a double grave. Instructions he gave in his last will and testament so that no one could dig him back up. Was he ready to rest eternally after a life of such monstrosity? Or was he afraid that someone would conduct experiments on him as he had done to so many hapless victims? The end of that. You know that place? The murder castle? Ooh. Tried to eat his kids. Oh my god. this real quick. Cause there's some shit that is absolutely not okay right there. That'll take 15 years to load. Let's move us to the fireplace. Look at my cute little guy. I got him after the stream ended last time. He's not as cool as the cat, but he has rainbow ears, so I love him. Hold on 1 second, y'all. Did I get it? Is it gone? Well, I don't know. Maybe it is. You put a progress photo on my Discord? Let's check it out. Let me look at it. Hold on. I had to get rid of that pride person. Ay, ay, ay. Discord. You put this in the selfish channel, silly goose. Oh, that's not so bad at all. What else do you have to clean up? Just the little things? Like on the... You need a cup. Get a cup and put all those tiny things in it. That's what I do. And then sometimes I knock the cup over. And I'm like, oh my god, I forgot I had that. Also, did you see the picture of my cat that I posted last night? Your little, I think that's a bat in the middle. Looks like her evil photo. Close that. Oh, you have an L-shaped. So what we can't see won't hurt you. All right, drink the water. Like, literally, what's the name of that place? It's like the only thing they sell is organization stuff, like bins and boxes and baskets. Bins and things? I don't know. But if I bought my bins from them, I would be single-handedly keeping them in business, I swear. I got bins everywhere. No, not Office Max. I worked there. There's a place that's only for the bins and boxes and stuff. Not like office supplies. All right, let's read the Black Dahlia. I know of this one. I have a blobfish, a crocheted potato, a burrito keychain, a pumpkin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of chapstick and lip balm. Excess is my middle name. Can you read Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson? No, that's copyrighted too. Black Dahlia. One of the most baffling murder mysteries in U.S. history began innocently enough on the morning of January 15th, 1947. Betty Bersinger was walking with her young daughter in the Leimert Park area of Los Angeles when she spotted something lying in a vacant lot that caused her blood to run cold. She ran to a nearby house and called the police. Officers Wayne Fitzgerald and Frank Perkins arrived on the scene shortly after 11 a.m. Lying only several feet from the road in plain sight was the naked body of a young woman. Her body had numerous cuts and abrasions, including a knife wound from ear to ear that resembled a ghoulish grin. Even more horrific was that her body had been completely severed at the midsection, and the two halves had been placed as if they were part of some morbid display. The killer appeared to have carefully posed the victim close to the street because he wanted people to find his grotesque handiwork. Something else that troubled the officers was that even though the body had been brutally violated and desecrated, there was very little blood found at the scene. The only blood evidence recovered was a possible bloody footprint in an empty cement package with a spot of blood on it. In fact, the body was so clean that it appeared to have just been washed. Sparkly deer is on some wrapping paper that needs to get put away somewhere. Oh, good luck. Your face. Oh, it's on YouTube specifically. So if you go watch it on YouTube, it should be there. It's not it's part of, the YouTube streaming thing. You can read any story off Reddit. Kind of you can. If it's like the No Sleep subreddit or any of the ones where like actual writers are sharing their stuff, it is copyrighted to them. Like the moment they make it public with their name on it, it's theirs, you know? So they could technically come after you for reading it. I don't know. I'll get through these books eventually, and then I will need some more things to read. Shortly before removing the body, officers scoured the area for a possible murder weapon, but none was recovered. DM me after this, we have to update my thing. Again? Boy, you gonna have to start paying for this shit. Seriously. The last time I updated my voicemail was like 15 years ago. No murder weapon was recovered. A coroner later determined that the cause of death was from hemorrhage and shock due to a concussion of the brain and lacerations of the face, probably from a very large knife. After a brief investigation, police were able to identify the deceased as Elizabeth Short, who was born in Hyde Park, Massachusetts on July 29, 1924. At age 19, Short had moved to California to live with her father, but she moved out and spent the next few years moving back and forth between California, Florida, and Massachusetts. In July 1946, Short returned to California to see Lieutenant Gordon Fickling, a former boyfriend, who was stationed in Long Beach. For the last 6 months of her life, Short lived in an assortment of hotels, rooming houses, and private homes. She was last seen a week before her body was found, which made police very interested in finding out where and with whom she had spent her final days. As police continued their investigation, reporters jumped all over the story and began referring to the unknown killer by names such as sex-crazed maniac and even werewolf. Short herself was also given a nickname, the Black Dahlia. Reporters said it was a name friends had called her as a play on the movie The Blue Dahlia, which had recently been released. However, others contend Short was never called the Black Dahlia while she was alive. It was just something reporters made up for a better story. Either way, it wasn't long before newspapers around the globe were splashing front-page headlines about the horrific murder of the Black Dahlia. As time wore on, hundreds of police officers were assigned to the Black Dahlia investigation. They combed the streets, interviewing people and following leads. Although police interviewed thousands of potential suspects, and dozens even confessed to the murder, to this day no one has ever officially been charged with the crime. More than 60 years and several books and movies after the crime, the Elizabeth Short murder case is still listed as open. We are no closer to knowing who killed Short or why than when her body was first discovered. My doctors... Your doctors won't confirm appointments. Okay. There's one bright note to this story. In February 1947, perhaps as a result of the Black Dahlia case, the state of California became the first state to pass a law requiring all convicted sex offenders to register themselves. That's it. That's all they've got about her. The Lizzie Borden murder mystery. Most people know the rhyme that begins, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. In reality, approximately 20 hatchet chops cut down Abby Borden, but no matter the number, Lizzie's stepmother was very much dead on that sultry August morning in 1892. I've never heard a day referred to as sultry before. Lizzie's father, Andrew, was killed about an hour later. His life was cut short by about a dozen hatchet chops to the head. No one knows who is guilty of these murders, but Lizzie has always carried the burden of suspicion. Andrew Jackson Borden had been one of the richest men in Fall River, Massachusetts, with a net worth of nearly $500,000. In 1892, that was enormous wealth. Andrew was a shrewd businessman. At the time of his death, he was the president of the Union Savings Bank and director of another bank, plus several profitable cotton mills. Side note, why are all of these related to Massachusetts? Like, what's going on over there? Despite his wealth, Andrew was miserly. Though some of his neighbors' homes had running hot water, the 3-story Borden home had just 2 cold water taps, and there was no water available at all above the first floor. The Borden's only latrine was in the cellar, so they generally used chamber pots that were either dumped onto the lawn behind the house or emptied into the cellar toilet. And although most wealthy people used gas lighting, the Bordens lit their house with kerosene lamps. Worst of all, for many years, Andrew was an undertaker who offered some of the lowest prices in town. He worked on the bodies in the basement of the Borden home, and allegedly he bent the knees of the deceased, and in some cases cut off their feet, to fit the bodies into smaller, less expensive coffins in order to increase his business. So despite the brutality of Andrew's murder, it seems few people mourned his loss. The question wasn't why he was killed, but who did it. In 1997, when psychic Jane Doherty visited the murder site, she uncovered several clues about the Lizzie Borden case. Doherty felt that the real murderer was someone named Willie. There is no real evidence to support this claim, but some say Andrew had an illegitimate son named William, who may have spent time as an inmate in an insane asylum. His constant companion was reportedly his hatchet, which he talked to as though it were a friend. Also, at least one witness reportedly saw William at the Borden house on the day of the murders. William was supposedly there to challenge Andrew about his new will. Was William the killer? A few years after the murders, William took poison and then hung himself in the woods. Near his swinging body, he'd reportedly left his hatchet on the ground. So with William dead and Lizzie already acquitted, the Borden murder case was put to rest. One of the most curious explanations for the murder involves the Borden servant, Bridget Sullivan. Her participation has always raised questions. Like the other members of the Borden household, Bridget had suffered from apparent food poisoning the night before the murders. She claimed to have been ill in the backyard of the Borden home. If snowflakes were hugs, I'd send you a blizzard. It's what I just received in a package. Aw, that's cute. During the time Abby was being murdered, Bridget was apparently washing windows in the back of the house. Later, when Andrew was killed, Bridget was resting in her room upstairs. Why didn't she hear 2 people being butchered? According to some theories, Lizzie and Bridget had been romantically involved. In this version of the story, their relationship was discovered shortly before the murders. Around this same time, Andrew was reportedly rewriting his will. His wife was now Mrs. Borden to Lizzie, not mother, as Lizzie had called her stepmother for many years. The reason for the estrangement was never clear. Lizzie also had a strange relationship with her father and had given him her high school ring as though he were her sweetheart. He wore the ring on his pinky finger and was buried with it. Just a day before the murders, Lizzie had been attempting to purchase prussic acid, a deadly poison, and the family came down with food poisoning that night. Some speculate that Bridget was Lizzie's accomplice in the murders and helped clean up the blood afterward. This theory was bolstered when, a few years after the murders, Lizzie became involved with actress Nance O'Neill. For 2 years, Lizzie and the actress were inseparable. This prompted Emma Borden, Lizzie's sister, to move out of their home. At the time, the rift between the sisters sparked rumors that either Lizzie or Emma might reveal more about the other's role in the 1892 murders. However, neither of them had said anything new about the killings. Most people believe that Lizzie was the killer. She was the only one accused of the crime, with good reason. Lizzie appeared to be the only one in the house at the time other than Bridget. She showed no signs of grief when the murders were discovered. During questioning, Lizzie changed her story several times. The evidence was entirely circumstantial, but it was compelling enough to go to trial. Ultimately, the jury accepted her attorney's closing argument that the murders were morally and physically impossible for this young woman defendant. In other words, Lizzie had to be innocent because she was petite and well-bred. In 19th century New England, that seemed like a logical and persuasive defense. Lizzie went free, and no one else was charged with the crimes. But Lizzie wasn't the only one with motive, means, and opportunity. The most likely suspects were family members working alone or with other relatives. Only a few had solid alibis, and, like Lizzie, many changed their stories during police questioning. But there was never enough evidence to officially accuse anyone other than Lizzie. So whether or not Lizzie Borden took an axe and killed her parents, she's the one best remembered for the crime. The Borden house has been sold several times over the years, but today it is a bed and breakfast, the main draw, of course, being the building's macabre history. The Victorian residence has been restored to reflect the details of the Borden home at the time of the murders, including the couch on which Andrew lay, his skull hideously smashed. Yep, definitely want to sleep there. As a guest, you can stay in one of 6 rooms, even the one in which Abby was murdered. Then, after a good night's sleep, you'll be treated to a breakfast reminiscent of the one the Bordens had on their final morning in 1892. That is, if you got to sleep at all. They say the place is haunted. As with all good morbid attractions, the proprietors at the Lizzie Borden B&B...
I am dehydration, so I must consume drink.
The timing, Alamon. Let me finish this, it's almost over. The proprietors at the B&B don't take themselves too seriously. Before you leave, you can stop by the gift shop and pick up a pair of hatchet earrings, an I Survived the Night at Lizzie Borden B&B t-shirt, or an axe-wielding Lizzie Borden bobblehead doll. A fucking bobblehead doll. Really? Okay, I hydrate. Honestly, feel like the water is not accomplishing anything. I'm gonna be real. Time to refresh the lurking. Yes, sir. I'm gonna put my chapstick number 5. Delightful. Alright, I don't know how to say that person's name, so I'm gonna skip it. Electrolytes. I know. I did have a Powerade. What did we do? Oh, it's right here. Will that help? Really? I will admit, I ended up with 3 Doom bins. Because it was midnight and I'd been doing it for 16 hours straight. And I was like, I just want to go to bed. Please, we're just going to put it in the bin. But it was too much for 1 bin, so I did another bin. What happens if you drink expired Powerade? Because this might be expired. I just like literally found it. Ugh. That tastes terrible. Worst case scenario, I shit myself. That's just normal Tuesday for me. Okay. Ohio's greatest unsolved mystery. From 1935 till 1938, a brutal madman roamed the flats of Cleveland. The killer, known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, is believed to have murdered 12 men and women. Despite a massive manhunt, the murderer was never apprehended. In 1935, the Depression had hit Cleveland hard, leaving large numbers of people homeless. Shantytown sprang up on the eastern side of the city in Kingsbury Run, a popular place for transients, near the area and nickel plate railroads. It's unclear who the butcher's first victim was. Recent research suggests it may have been an unidentified woman found floating in Lake Erie in pieces on September 5, 1934. She would be known as Jane Doe 1, but dubbed by some as the Lady of the Lake. The first official victim was found in the Jackass Hill area of Kingsbury Run on September 23, 1935. The unidentified body, labeled John Doe, had been dead for almost a month. A mere 30 feet away from the body was another victim, Edward Andrassy. Unlike John Doe, Andrassy had only been dead for days, indicating that the spot was a dumping ground. Police began staking out the area. After a few months passed without another body, police thought the worst was over. Then on January 26, 1936, the partial remains of a new victim, a woman, were found in downtown Cleveland. On February 7th, more remains were found at a separate location, and the deceased was identified as Florence Genevieve Polillo. Despite similarities among the three murders, authorities had yet to connect them. Serial killers were highly uncommon at the time. On June 5th, two young boys passing through Kingsbury Run discovered a severed head. The rest of the body was found near the Nickel Plate Railroad police station. Despite 6 distinctive tattoos on the man's body, thus the nickname Tattoo Man, he was never identified and became John Doe 2. At this point, Cleveland's newly appointed Director of Public Safety, Elliot Ness, was officially briefed on the case. While Ness and his men hunted down leads, the headless body of another unidentified male was found west of Cleveland on July 22, 1936. Hey, my dad's finally born. Okay, Dad's alive now. It appeared that the man, John Doe 3, had been murdered months earlier. On September 10th, the headless body of a sixth victim, John Doe 4, was found in Kingsbury Run. Ness officially started spearheading the investigation. Determined to bring the killer to justice, Ness's staff fanned out across the city, even going undercover in the Kingsbury Run area. As 1936 drew to a close, no suspects had been named, nor new victims discovered. City residents believed that Ness's team had run the killer off, but future events would prove that the killer was back with a vengeance. A woman's mutilated torso washed up on the beach at 156th Street on February 23, 1937. The rest would wash ashore 2 months later. Strangely, the body washed up in the same location as the Lady of the Lake had 3 years earlier. On June 6, 1937, teenager Russell Lawyer found the decomposed body of a woman inside of a burlap sack under the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge in Cleveland. With the body was a newspaper from June of the previous year, suggesting a timeline for the murder. An investigation indicated the body might belong to one Rose Wallace. This was never confirmed, and the victim is sometimes referred to as Jane Doe 2. Pieces of another man's body, the ninth victim, began washing ashore on July 6th, just below Kingsbury Run. Cleveland newspapers were having a field day with the case that the great Elliot Ness couldn't solve. This fueled Ness, and he promised justice. The next 9 months were quiet, and the public began to relax. When a woman's severed leg was found in the in the river, on April 8, 1938, however, people debated its connection to the butcher, but the rest of Jane Doe 3 was soon found inside 2 burlap sacks floating in the river. Sans head, of course. On August 16, 1938, the last 2 confirmed victims of the butcher were found together at the East 9th Street Lakeshore dump. Jane Doe 4 had apparently been dead for 4 to 6 months prior to discovery, while John Doe 6 may have been dead for almost 9 months. Something snapped inside Elliot Ness. On the night of August 18th, Ness and dozens of police officials raided the shantytowns in the flats, ending up in Kingsbury Run. Along the way, they interrogated or arrested anyone they came across, and Ness ordered the shanties burned to the ground. There would be no more confirmed victims of the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. There were 2 prime suspects in the case, though no one was ever charged. The first was Dr. Francis Sweeney, a surgeon with the knowledge many believed necessary to mutilate the victims the way the killer did. He was also a cousin of Congressman Martin Sweeney, a known political opponent of Ness. In August 1938, Dr. Sweeney was interrogated by Ness, 2 other men, and the inventor of the polygraph machine, Dr. Royal Grossman. By all accounts, Sweeney failed the polygraph test several times, and Ness believed he had his man, but he was released due to lack of evidence. 2 days after the interrogation, on August 25, 1938, Sweeney checked himself into the Sandusky Veterans Hospital. He remained institutionalized at various facilities until his death in 1965. But because Sweeney checked himself in, he could have left whenever he desired. The other suspect was Frank Dolezal, who was arrested by private investigators on July 5, 1939, as a suspect in the murder of Florence Polillo, with whom he had lived for a time. While in custody, Dolezal confessed to killing Polillo, although some believe the confession was forced. Either way, Dolezal died under mysterious circumstances while incarcerated at the county jail before he could be charged. As for Elliot Ness, some believe his inability to bring the butcher to trial weighed on him for the rest of his life. Ness went to his grave without getting a conviction. To this day, the case remains open. When you see what I have in store, you're gonna smack people. Smack them in a good way or in a bad way? what it is. Drink more yucky juice. Okay. Anything but splendor. Natalie Wood. The official account of Natalie Wood's tragic death is riddled with holes. For this reason, cover-up theorists continue to run hog wild with conjecture. Here's a sampling of the questions, facts, and assertions surrounding the case. There are those who will forever recall Natalie Wood as the adorable child actress from Miracle on 34th Street, and those who remember her as the sexy but wholesome grown-up star of movies such as West Side Story, Splendor in the Grass, and Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. Both groups generally agree that Wood had uncommon beauty and talent. Wood appeared in her first film, Happy Land, in a bit part alongside other people from her hometown of Santa Rosa, California, where the film was shot. She stood out to the director, who remembered her later when he needed to cast a child in another film. Wood was uncommonly mature and professional for a child actress, which helped make her a relatively smooth transition to ingenue roles. Although Wood befriended James Dean and Sal Mineo, her troubled young co-stars from Rebel Without a Cause, and she briefly dated Elvis Presley, she preferred to move in established Hollywood circles. By the time she was 20, she was married to Robert Wagner and was co-starring with Frank Sinatra in Kings Go Forth, which firmly ensconced her in the Hollywood establishment. The early 1960s represent the high point of Woods' career, and she specialized in playing high-spirited characters with determination and spunk. She added 2 more Oscar nominations to the one she received for Rebel, and racked up 5 Golden Globe nominations for Best Actress. This period also proved to be personally turbulent for Wood, as she suffered through a failed marriage to Wagner and another to Richard Gregson. After taking time off to raise children, she remarried Wagner and returned to her acting career. And so, on November 29, 1981, the headline hit the newswires much like an out-of-control car hits a brick wall. Natalie Wood, the beautiful, vivacious 43-year-old star of stage and screen, had drowned after falling from her yacht, the Splendor, which was anchored off California's Santa Catalina Island. Wood had been on the boat during a break from her latest film, Brainstorm, and was accompanied by Wagner and Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken. Skipper Dennis Davern was at the helm. Foul play was not suspected. After a short investigation, Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Thomas Noguchi listed Wood's death as an accidental drowning. Tests revealed that she had consumed 7 or 8 glasses of wine, and the coroner contended that in her intoxicated state, Wood had probably stumbled and fallen overboard while attempting to untie the yacht's rubber dinghy. He also stated that cuts and bruises on her body could have occurred when she fell from the boat. To this day, many question Woods' mysterious demise and believe that the accidental drowning theory sounds a bit too convenient. Pointed questions have led to many rumors. Does someone know more about Woods' final moments than they're letting on? Was her drowning really an accident, or did someone intentionally or accidentally help her go overboard? Could this be why she sustained substantial bruising on her face and the back of her legs? Why was Wagner so reluctant to publicly discuss the incident? Were Christopher Walken and Wood an item, as had been rumored? With this possibility in mind, could a booze-fueled fight have erupted between the 2 men? Could Wood have then tried to intervene only to be knocked overboard for her efforts? And why did authorities declare Woods' death accidental so quickly? Would such a ruling have been issued had the principals not been famous and influential? Robert Wagner is 95 years old. Wow. At the time of Woods' death, she and Wagner were 7 years into their second marriage to each other. Whether Wood was carrying on an affair with Walken, as was alleged, may be immaterial, even if it made for interesting tabloid fodder. But Wagner's perception of their relationship could certainly be a factor. If nothing else, it might better explain the argument that ensued between Wagner and Walken that fateful night. Further information about Woods' death is sparse because no eyewitnesses have come forward. However, a businesswoman whose boat was anchored nearby testified that she heard a woman shouting for help, and then a voice responding, "We'll be over to get you," so the woman went back to bed. Just after dawn, Woods' body was found floating a mile away from the Splendor, approximately 200 yards offshore. The dinghy was found nearby, its only cargo a stack of life jackets. In 2008, after 27 years of silence, Robert Wagner recalled in his autobiography, Pieces of My Heart, A Life, that he and Walken had engaged in a heated argument during supper after Walken had suggested that Wood star in more films, effectively keeping her away from their children. Wagner and Walken then headed topside to cool down. Sometime around midnight, Wagner said he returned to his cabin and discovered that his wife was missing. He soon realized that the yacht's dinghy was gone as well. In his book, he surmised that Wood may have gone to secure the dinghy that had been noisily slapping against the boat. Then, tipsy from the wine, she probably fell into the ocean and drowned. Walken notified the authorities. Was Natalie Wood's demise the result of a deadly mix of wine and salt water, as the coroner's report suggests? This certainly could be the case. But why would she leave her warm cabin to tend to a loose rubber dinghy in the dark of night? Could an errant rubber boat really make such a commotion? Perhaps we'll never know what happened that fateful night, but an interview conducted shortly before Woods' death proved prophetic. "I'm frightened to death of the water," said Wood about a long-held fear. "I can swim a little bit, but I'm afraid of water that's dark." Oh, that's sad. I don't know if Christopher Walken would do such a thing. I don't know, man. He's something. Let's do The Mysterious Death of Christopher Marlowe. In 1593, we're going back a minute here. In 1593, Christopher Marlowe, the most famous playwright in London, was killed when he accidentally stabbed himself during a tavern brawl. His premature death is one of the greatest tragedies in English literature, snuffing out a career that may have still been in its infancy. Shakespeare, who was Marlowe's same age, was just coming into his own as a writer at the time. But some people continue to doubt the official story, that Marlowe accidentally stabbed himself while fighting over the bill. After all, Marlowe and some of the others in the room with him had ties to the Elizabethan underworld. Was his really an accidental death, or could it have been murder? Born to a shoemaker the same year that Shakespeare was born to a glove maker, Marlowe attended Cambridge University, where he posed for a portrait that showed him in a black velvet shirt, smirking beside his Latin motto, "What nourishes me destroys me." He was a distinguished enough scholar that he seems to have been recruited, as many Cambridge scholars of the day were, to work as an undercover agent. Letters from the government excusing him from missing classes seem to back up the widely held theory that he went on spy missions in Spain. When he returned to London, he found fame as a playwright, churning out blood and thunder shockers such as Dr. Faustus that helped pioneer the use of blank verse, and were some of the first great pieces of secular theatrical entertainment produced in the English language. But to say that Marlowe had a wild side is to put things mildly. He was imprisoned twice, once for his role in a fight that left a tavern keeper dead. He was acquitted when a jury determined that he had acted in self-defense. He ran with an underground group of atheists who called themselves the School of Night. They hung around in graveyards, reading poetry and having the sort of blasphemous debates that were illegal in Elizabethan England, where everyone was required to be a member of the Church of England. Breaking somewhat from her predecessors, Queen Elizabeth generally didn't care too much if people doubted religion in their minds, as long as they kept their mouths shut and kept attending church services. But for someone as famous as Marlowe to be a heretic was dangerous. Richard Baines, a professional snitch. I want to be a professional snitch? Is that a job? He wrote a letter to the government containing a bunch of blasphemous things that he claimed to have heard Marlowe say, such as that Moses was really just a juggler, that people in the New World had stories and histories dating back 10,000 years, which went against the official view that Adam and Eve had lived within 6,000 years, and that the Virgin Mary herself was dishonest. Around the same time, the government arrested Thomas Kidd, Marlowe's former roommate, for possessing atheist literature, and Kidd said under torture that it was Marlowe who had turned him on to atheism in the first place. And so, at the height of his fame, Marlowe was arrested for blasphemy. He was released on parole in order to check in every day until he was brought to trial, at which he faced a possible sentence of death. If lucky, he would just get his nose chopped off. Marlowe never once checked in with authorities so far as is known, and he was killed in Deptford only a couple weeks later while awaiting trial. The exact circumstances of his death are still not quite agreed upon, though a detailed coroner's report exists. Documents state that Marlowe and a few other men had spent the day in an establishment owned by the widow Bull. But what sort of business this was is a matter of some mystery. It's been variously described as a tavern, a brothel, or a sort of bed and breakfast. The fact that the investigations into what happened that day mention a reckoning is about the only evidence we have that it was any sort of business at all, not just a house owned by Miss Eleanor Bull. However, according to official reports, a bill was presented to Marlowe and his friends. A fight broke out over who should pay it, and in the scuffle, Marlowe accidentally stabbed himself below the eye, and then and there instantly died. Now, most fights over bills. I shouldn't have to pay an equal share just because I had water and appetizers and not steak and beer. Most bills do not end in knife fights, but this explanation seems sensible enough on the surface. The theaters were closed at the time due to a plague outbreak, and Marlowe was probably hard up for money. Perhaps he had taken up an offer of going to dinner thinking that his meal was being paid for, and when he was asked to kick in for the bill, his hot temper got the best of him. He reached for the dagger of one of the other men present, one Ingram Fraser, and stabbed himself while the other men tried to stop him from attacking. The death was officially determined to be the result of an accidental self-inflicted wound, but more and more scholars now believe that Marlowe was murdered to make sure he didn't reveal sensitive information at his upcoming trial. It does seem that a lot of people may have had a reason to want Marlowe to be killed before he could go to trial. Fraser, for example, had been working for Thomas Walsingham, a relative of Queen Elizabeth's Secretary of State, and had Marlowe been convicted of atheism, Walsingham himself would have been disgraced and financially ruined for having once been Marlowe's patron. Perhaps Fraser was acting on his boss's orders and killed Marlowe to ensure his own future. But others believe that the political murder theory doesn't go far enough, and that the body on the coroner's slab wasn't Marlowe at all, but the body of a man named John Penry, who had been hastily hanged. According to this theory, Marlowe wasn't killed at all, but instead escaped to the continent where he kept on writing. Some of the wildest theories in this vein hold that he was the true author of Shakespeare's plays. It seems far-fetched, but if anyone could have pulled off faking his own death, it was Christopher Marlowe. And while conspiracies have tried to claim several people as the true author of Shakespeare's works, Marlowe is the only one who was a good enough author that he could have rivaled Shakespeare for the title of greatest dramatist of the English language. An informant. Ah, yeah, that's true. That's true. There's conspiracy theories that Marlowe... Yeah. Marlowe was actually the author of Shakespeare's plays. Ooh, Marilyn Monroe. I know her. And I know how to say her name. Let's go. I really hope that's not expired. I don't know. Maybe I just don't like Powerade. Marilyn Monroe was and still is one of the sexiest women ever to grace the silver screen. But like so many of her fellow movie stars, Monroe's deeply troubled personal life often overshadowed her professional achievements. This was especially true when the world learned of her tragic death on August 5, 1962, at age 36. Marilyn Monroe was born Norma Jean Baker on June 1, 1926. Her life was troubled almost from the start. Her mother was institutionalized with mental problems, and the man she was told was her father, Edward Mortensen, was killed in a motorcycle accident when she was 3. As a result, Norma Jean spent most of her childhood in foster care. Norma Jean married at 16, then found success as a model, which eventually led to a name change and a brief contract with 20th Century Fox. Her first credited role came in Dangerous Years in 1947. It was a critical flop, and studio head Daryl Zanuck didn't know what to do with this breathy starlet, so her contract was not renewed. However, she later returned and made most of her films for Fox. Monroe's chaotic personal life made constant news. She married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio in 1954, but their union was tumultuous, and they divorced 9 months later. In 1956, she married playwright Arthur Miller, who was nearly 11 years her senior. That marriage lasted until 1961. There are rumors that Monroe was also involved with President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert as well. In her final months, Monroe was living in a house in the Brentwood section of Los Angeles. On the evening of August 4th, she was visited by her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson. Then she made several phone calls from her bedroom, including one to actor Peter Lawford, a Kennedy family confidant. Late that night, Monroe's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, noticed a light coming from under the actress's bedroom door, which she thought was odd. When Monroe didn't respond to her knocks, Murray went around to the side of the house and peered through the bedroom window. Monroe looked peculiar. That's hard to say. Murray later told police, so she called Greenson, who broke into Monroe's bedroom and found her on the bed unconscious. Greenson then called Monroe's personal physician, Dr. Hyman Engelberg, who pronounced the actress dead. It was then that the police were notified. Los Angeles Police Sergeant Jack Clemens was the first on the scene. He said he found Monroe naked and face down on her bed with an empty bottle of sleeping pills nearby. A variety of other pill bottles littered the nightstand. Monroe's body was taken to Westwood Village Mortuary, then transferred to the county morgue, and her house was sealed and placed under guard. LA Deputy Medical Examiner Dr. Thomas Noguchi performed Monroe's autopsy and concluded in his official report that the actress had died from an overdose of Nembutal, a sleeping pill, and chloral hydrate, a mild sedative, and ruled that it was a probable suicide. Over the years, conspiracy theorists have had a field day with Monroe's death because of numerous inconsistencies between Noguchi's autopsy report and the evidence at the scene, as well as in the stories of those who were at the scene. Some conspiracy theorists believe that Monroe was murdered and that her death was made to look like a suicide. By whom remains a mystery, though the most prevalent theory, unproved by anyone, is that the Kennedy family had her killed to avoid a scandal. However, given Monroe's habit of taking more medication than doctors prescribed because she thought she had a high tolerance for it, accidental overdose cannot be ruled out. Today, Marilyn Monroe remains as popular as ever. Her image graces a wide variety of products worldwide, and the resulting royalties generate nearly $1 million per year. Even in death, Hollywood's most famous blonde goddess continues to bask in the bright spotlight of fame. I think I will do one more. Because if I keep talking for more than 2 hours straight, it's going to be a problem for later me. Especially if you play Yap Yap, because if you can't Yap Yap, how do you play Yap Yap? You know what I mean? Lying in wait. There are those who are famous in life, and there are those who are more famous in death. And Eugene is certainly the latter. An unclaimed body in the town of Sabina turned a funeral home into a tourist attraction and drew visitors from far and wide. When most people die, their remains are quickly taken care of. Not so for the mystery man known as Eugene. After being embalmed, he hung around for nearly 35 years before finally being laid to rest. Eugene's decades-long saga began and ended in the tiny town of Sabina, about 10 miles outside of Wilmington, where he died along the 3C Highway on June 6, 1929. Several people reported seeing him walk listlessly through town as if he were ill, but he didn't stop or ask anyone for help. No identification was found on his body except for a slip of paper containing an address in Cincinnati. But when the Cincinnati police went to investigate, they found only a vacant lot. Police talked to a man living next door named Eugene Johnson. I know that name. Anyway, thus did the unknown dead man get the moniker Eugene. All that is known about Eugene is that he was African American, was thought to be between 50 and 80 years old, and died of natural causes. Authorities took him to the Littleton Funeral Home where he was embalmed. But rather than bury Eugene in a pauper's grave, the funeral home's owners decided to wait on the off chance that his survivors might be located. Eugene spent the next 3.5 decades at the Littleton Funeral Home, lying in state in a small house in the side yard. As his legend grew, curiosity seekers started dropping by to see the man that no one knew. So many, in fact, that the owners erected a screen across the room to protect him from grabby souvenir seekers. Out of respect, the funeral home provided Eugene with a brand new suit every year. Before long, Eugene had become a bona fide tourist attraction. Buses passing through town would stop by the funeral home so travelers could stretch their legs and take a peek at the Sabina mummy. On holidays and summer weekends, a line of people waiting to pass by Eugene's resting place would form, which only proves how hungry the citizens of Sabina were for entertainment on a Saturday night. During the 35 years that Eugene lay in state, an estimated 1.5 million people paid their respects, while 1 million of them, including several celebrities, signed his voluminous guest books. None of the visitors ever claimed to recognize him. Eugene sometimes became the victim of pranksters during his years at the Littleton Funeral Home. On a number of occasions, he was kidnapped, but quickly recovered. Once, members of a fraternity drove him all the way to the Ohio State campus. In 1964, Eugene was finally put to rest. It was evident that no one was going to claim him, and many found the pranks being played on him demeaning and harmful to business. Rather than bury Eugene in Potter's Field, the owners of the funeral home purchased a plot in Sabina Cemetery and paid for his burial expenses, including one last brand new suit. Only a handful of people attended the service for Eugene on October 21st, and employees of the Sabina Cemetery, Spurgeon Vault Company, and Littleton Funeral Home acted as pallbearers. A local Methodist minister offered a few words and a prayer, and Eugene was finally able to rest in peace. The end. Page 69. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, ay, ay. I'll keep going longer than you want to. I mean, I want to go for like 4 hours, but my voice is like, maybe you shouldn't. Second time you mentioned the game. Well, like, everybody bought it. So, right? Like, how do you kidnap? If there's 1 million people coming through to see this dude, how do you even get an opportunity to kidnap him? That's the wild part. Late night, I guess. You'd think they'd lock it up or something? Oh, but anyway, I had actually said on the day that everybody got it, I was like, oh yeah, we should play on Saturday. So that's why I bring it up, because it is Saturday. I think. I've lost all track of time this week. I have no idea what day it is anymore. Yeah, Saturday. Okay, good. Also, my youngest child, my youngest baby, is going to be 10 whole years old in a few days. And that's sad. I need to know somebody that has a newborn so I can snuggle wuggle it. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, and I gotta show you. I got this. I'm gonna mark it off for you, Damiana. I'm gonna mark it off because I believe that you're gonna keep going. Plus, you've already posted a progress picture, so you're clearly gonna do it. Bink. Okay, but so there's this guy, right? Just become a NICU nurse. I know, like, there's actually a thing where you can, like, the whole point is to go in and snuggle the babies because they need like human contact, you know? Oh my god, I want to do that so bad. Like, it's just a couple more years. Lainey does, but she's a ways away. Have baby will travel. I will go. What am I looking for? Oh yeah, spirit companion. So these are what I unlocked last time. So I had the cat, and I had this jelly guy, and I unlocked this dude, and then this guy, and then the yarn one, I'm so sad, is a spider, because I hate spiders, but I love yarn, and he is awfully cute, but I don't want a spider crawling around on the screen. And then Among Us, for some reason. I don't understand the crossover there, but what else? Congrats, this is now the only way I can read books. Now read my Kawasaki manual. Can do, buddy. Send it over. Yeah, I know about the professional snugglers. I feel like there's danger there, you know what I mean? There's not so much danger snuggling babies. Like, I'm super serious about having the daycare that only takes kids under 6 months old. Like, because other daycares, they charge more, or they just straight up won't take them for the first couple of months. And so, like, if you're going straight back to work, it's really difficult. And I only want the babies that are less than 6 months old. So, like, this feels like a niche that needs to be filled. Know what I mean? I want to fill the niche. And switch it back to the kitty cat. No, let's keep it here. Okay. Look at that, we did the whole list. Ta-da! hire a guard to sit in the chair. Oh boy. All right. Let me see who we will raid to. And then the YouTubers might just be Damiana, but the YouTubers, go on about your business. I know you're going to get that desk done. You're going to do a great job. You're already doing a great job. Proud of you. And you are going to post a picture of it being finished, right? Gamble's playing Hightail. Or there's a girl who's just literally coloring in a coloring book. Let's go see. Well, yeah, absolutely do that. This girl's pretty, and she's coloring nicely, inside the lines even. Let's go say hi to her. We are probably not the vibe for this girl. I'm just saying. But she's cute. She has like a crocheted thing on her headset, so I'm going there. I want a bad girl that colors outside the lines. Well, this looks like a very good girl, so sorry. All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much for being here with me today. Damiana, good job on your desk. Yeah, absolutely proud of you. Proud of myself for doing my shit. Getting it done-ish. We're not going to talk about the doom bins. But until next time, which might be tonight or might be tomorrow. Love you, see ya. Bye-bye.